The tremendous poverty that already exists in this nation is exacerbated by the ongoing natural disasters, lack of political stability, and lack of security. We are talking about Somalia, a country on Africa's east coast. Famine brought on by drought killed approximately 250,000 Somalians in 2011, with children making up half of the fatalities. There are several factors contributing to the current predicament. The country's ability to avert crisis has been further exacerbated by years of locust infestations, COVID-19, political instability, and effects of the Ukraine conflict on international food prices. The ongoing drought has been caused by 5 consecutive failed rainy seasons exacerbated by climate change. The country has been able to obtain foreign aid in resolving its ongoing economic and political challenges thanks to the establishment of the new ruling party within this new framework. After a peaceful transfer of power in 2017 that enabled the National Partnership for Somalia to be effective and provide longer-term cooperation for international organisations towards resolving pressing concerns, international relations were further improved. Now, let's dig deep now and understand the reasons behind this catastrophic situation in Somalia. Economy of Somalia. What do we know? Agribusiness makes up over 3/5 of Somalia's economy. However, growing cattle rather than crops is the country's major source of income. The military government of Mohammed Siad Barre imposed scientific socialism from 1969 to the beginning of the 1980s. This system was characterized by the nationalization of banks, insurance companies, oil companies, and major industrial companies, the establishment of state-owned businesses, farms, and trading firms, and the setting up of state-controlled cooperatives. Agriculture is by far the most significant economic sector, accounting for nearly 3/5 of Somalia's foreign exchange earnings, with livestock rearing outpacing crop growth in value by a factor of 4. 3 subsectors may be found in Somalia's agriculture. Nomadic pastoralism, which takes place outside of agriculture zones, is the first. This industry, which focuses on producing cattle, camels, goats, and sheep, has grown more and more market-orientated. The traditional, primary subsistence-based agriculture that small farmers engage in makes up the second sector. Market-oriented agriculture on medium and large-scale irrigated plantations in the lower Juba and Shabil rivers makes up the third sector. In that location, vegetables, grapefruits, mangoes, papayas, rice, cotton, and sugarcane are the main crops. The minor fishing industry in the nation is centered on the north, where tuna and mackerel are caught and canned. Sharks are frequently captured by artisanal inshore fishermen and sold dry. The best fish and shellfish are prepared for export in southern Somalia. Early in the 21st century, piracy along the coasts, overfishing, and climate change all had an impact on Somalia's fishing sector. As you have seen, the economy is totally primary. Hunger and poverty in Somalia. One of the most impoverished nations in Africa is Somalia. The percentage of people who earn less than $12.15 per day, or close to 70% of the population, is greater in rural regions among pastoralists who live as nomads. Acute malnutrition affects about 1.8 million children. At least 1,049 children died in hospitals and health facilities between January and November 2022 from reasons connected to starvation, with many more deaths going unreported. Malnutrition must be addressed right away, not just to boost a person's chance of survival, but also because hunger during a child's first 2 years of life can have gravely detrimental impacts on their future physical and intellectual development. Adults who have survived childhood starvation are more likely to be underweight, shorter, and have lesser bone and muscle density, in addition to having worse scholastic achievement. Hunger particularly affects pregnant women because of the elevated risks of anemia and deadly delivery outcomes for both mother and fetus. Hunger also has a cyclical aspect, with parents who experience great hunger early in life being unable to escape those circumstances and becoming more likely to produce children who are underweight and living in poverty. Due to this poverty, Somalia has a high death rate. You shouldn't be surprised. Somalia has a population that is 30% or younger on average. The average age of death is 57 years. Numerous factors connected to poverty, including inadequate infrastructure, a lack of official access to healthcare, and hygienic problems contribute to this short life expectancy. Poor infrastructure is a result of the destruction caused by the civil war. Because of the inadequate infrastructure, access to clean water, power, and other essential services varies from family to household, with the majority lacking one or more. Since the majority of Somalis cannot afford private healthcare, treating these ensuing health conditions is practically impossible for them due to a lack of health insurance. The cycle keeps repeating and intensifies, worsening Somalia's already dire situation of poverty. Young Somalis can also find few work because the country has been in ruins due to conflict from the previous 20 years. As a result, 67% of Somali's young are unemployed or unable to meet their basic necessities. Doomed by its geography? Conflicts? Geographically, Somalia is a country of extremes. The majority of the land is incredibly flat, with few natural obstacles limiting the movement of the nomads and their cattle, with the exception of a hilly coastal region in the north and a few distinct river basins. We can't only blame geography, right? The infrastructure and economy of Somalia have essentially been wrecked by decades of civil war, which has also divided the nation into regions governed by different people. Somalia is currently among the poorest countries in the world as a result of the aftermath of a civil war and protracted warfare, typically as many other poor countries. The dissolution of the Somali Democratic Republic in 1991, which caused division in the nation, is primarily to blame for this. There was a war that killed hundreds of Somali natives. The lives of the Somali people were abruptly turned upside down by conflict. Many people needed to leave their houses to survive. The majority of what is left of Somalia is destitute and struggling to live due to the country's current 73% poverty rate. In 2012, a new government was sworn into office after a shaky transitional administration in Somalia handed over power. Things didn't get much better, sadly. The newly established Federal Republic of Somalia had only partial authority over the nation. However, there was optimism that the new administration would bring about a new age in which peace would be attained and Somalis could concentrate on reconstructing their nation. Somali's socio-economic disaster. Somali has struggled with an underdeveloped infrastructure and acute poverty for many years. This latest famine has added to the burdens already bearing by an already worn-out infrastructure and has resulted in challenging socio-economic issues. Drought, political unrest and violence have all contributed to the displacement of 1.3 million Somalis nationwide. Millions of people who are being forced further into poverty are fleeing to cities and other internally displaced groups in search of food and water. Acute food insecurity is a problem for up to 1.1 million internally displaced persons, putting strain on the local administration as it tries to give those who have been forced to flee options for jobs and healthcare. Farmers have been particularly heavily hit by the drought, since many have lost all their possessions due to failing cattle and crops. Poorer farmers are more vulnerable to the hardships of famines because they frequently incur heavy debt loads when the cost of livestock feed rises and as a result of incurring more debt to buy food for their family. More than 3 million animals have died nationwide as a result of the drought and locust infestations, which have also damaged farms and pastoral land. In some areas, agricultural output has nearly come to an end. Due to the present hunger crisis, 7.1 million people in Somalia are unable to satisfy their daily food needs. No wonder. Without international intervention, this number will very certainly increase, bringing more deaths and destruction. Is there a place for social protection to play a role in this? Of course there is. By offering help and access to socio-economic possibilities to poor and vulnerable households, social protection can reduce poverty and inequality across the nation. Interventions in social protection can lessen the damaging effects that shocks and protracted crises have on people's well-being and human capital. Somalia must make investments in a comprehensive, shock-responsive and human capital-orientated social protection system that safeguards residents from risks and encourages inclusive policies, given the country's enormous potential for strengthening its human capital. Somalia has to gradually move away from humanitarian help and toward development strategies so that the most vulnerable people can receive urgent relief through the fusion of national social safety net and humanitarian services. It is also advised to have a common concept of monitoring and evaluation, support for policies, institution development, and operational alignment in areas like targeting and eligibility, benefit levels, and data sharing. With the inauguration of its first national, government-led flagship social safety net program, known as Bax Nano, Somalia's 2019 social protection policy marks an essential first step towards contributing to economic progress, peace and security, human development, and equity. In certain rural regions of the 5 federal member states and Somaliland, the program provides nutrition-linked cash transfers to 200,000 poor and vulnerable households with children under the age of 5. About 1.2 million people. The Bax Nano initiative demonstrates the government's commitment to making social assistance a priority in order to provide direct, prompt, and targeted aid focused at meeting basic requirements and safeguarding human capital among the most underprivileged and rural communities. A unified social registry, a pension plan for government employees, livestock insurance, long-term funding of the Bax Nano from the national budget of the government, and gradual coverage expansion are all necessary for the social protection system to be strengthened. In order to act as a multi-sectoral platform for coordination and improved targeting of social protection-related programs, the social register would also need to be operationalised. A 5-year national strategy for registration would need to be implemented, and financing would need to be mobilised for execution. As youth participation in social protection measures is essential to Somalia's future productivity and stability, it is also crucial to build and execute a youth-focused productivity safety net. This is true particularly for the youth living in urban areas. Similar to poverty, Somalia's famine is primarily man-made and thrives during times of conflict and upheaval. The previous several centuries have shown us that without stability and peace, the prospects for any type of development, economic, human, or social, are bleak. Like other least developed countries, LDCs, this crisis is characterized by the tremendous poverty that its population endures, which exacerbates the situation.